Let me begin that I'd like to say how honored I am and humbled to be here this morning, especially after this past Saturday at the men's conference. We were really blessed with the Lord's wisdom and grace that this past Saturday. This past August, I had the opportunity to attend alert training. Now, alert training stands for Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training, and I do this as part of my reserve duties with the Sheriff's Office. And it's how we deal with an active shooter event. During our training, we focused on threshold evaluation in a hallway with multiple doorways and how to get through them dynamically and safely when there is a possible threat. Most of this involves teamwork, except when you are a single officer. As we go through the hallway of life, we go through many doors. In fact, every door, every day is a new doorway, so to speak. It was once said that no man steps into the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. Each doorway that we go through has its own sets of challenges. Some are filled with success, many have consequences, and a few have achievements. So today, I'm asking you, what doorway are you in, and what's lurking behind your own doorway? Each decision that we make throughout our day can lead us through a different doorway, and sometimes it is life itself that forces us to go through that door, but there are many times where we do have a choice. Now, during our training, we would come to locked doors or something out of play, and our decision, of course, was easy because we could bypass that door or area. It became what is called a known area. But on doorways that were either open or unlocked, they are identified as an unknown area. And as we would have to do a threshold, that's when we would have to do a threshold evaluation. We had to decide whether to allow the doorway to breathe before we had to pie the door, or to set the door before searching or clearing the room. Now, what I'm referring to by pieing the door is from the hallway, basically looking inside the room from the hallway by making a pie slice from the corner of the threshold to the opposite side of the threshold, so you can see what's inside while utilizing cover. By allowing the room to breathe is to open the door and wait a moment to listen and observe if there is anything in that room that could indicate a threat. Unless there is some driving force for us to react to and make us take the room dynamically, otherwise we would just go in deliberately and clear the room. Another tactic, which is more aggressive in nature, is to set the door. Our partner would open the door pretty violently, and another officer or a designated team member would stand in front of the doorway in the threshold from the hallway, and this was done because there was a reason to believe the threat was present, and we could engage the threat from the hallway. Now, all this is usually done as a 2-man, 3-man, or a 4-man team. Okay? However, when you're the first one to arrive on this type of scene, unless there is that driving force, such as gunshots, people running away, wounded people, then it is necessary to wait for backup. When there is a driving force, you have to take action and go toward the threat on your own in order to save lives. In this type of scenario, you only do a quick pie inside any open door as you go by in search of the aggressor. A quick pie means you are pieing the room as you pass by it and only go inside the room if there's a reason. Many times in life, we don't have that team. We are often alone, and we end up going through doorways in our own life hallway and going in doors that we never intended to go through. These doors vary somewhat, but many times there are threats on the other side of the threshold. We have a tendency to feel or believe there is a need, a temptation, or a driving force, or some perceived necessity to go through that doorway. For us men, there's always the doorway of anger, and it can end up in the loss of control. There are other doorways such as depression, pornography, alcohol, drugs that can open up other doorways, some that have been mentioned already. Some doorways can lead into hanging around the wrong crowd. This can lead to betrayal and loneliness, and some doorways can even lead to death, suicide, or imprisonment. There are many doorways that should have been bypassed, but it's that driving force that somehow deceives us, and in our denial or our foolish belief that somehow we can handle it on our own. Maybe we should have allowed that doorway to breathe before we entered it and tried to take it by ourselves. There is no limit to where a doorway can lead, known or unknown. Now, I personally have been through doorways that I have had to ask myself, how in the blank, expletive usually, did I get here? Most of it was when I was on active duty and in college. I went down a path in a relationship because I thought I could change her. That took me to a place where I found myself working as a hunting guide on top of a mountain in Colorado. And as I look back now, it may have been on top of a mountain, but in reality, it was a desert. My saving grace was returning home, and I re-enlisted in the Army Reserves and later the Texas Army National Guard, returning to a structured foundation of the military. I returned to school, got married, and stayed married for 10 years. It was an up and down relationship. And of course, when that didn't work out because somewhere of receiving my commission in the Guard and joining the sheriff's office, we had grown apart, the best thing to do was leave. While divorce is another threshold I don't recommend, in my case, it turned out to be a good thing. But there was one common denominator in all those years, and that was I neither knew nor was I following Christ. Throughout my life, I have often claimed to believe in Jesus, but I had no real knowledge, and the only spiritual upbringing I had is what I call a Heinz 57 belief. Growing up, my family would go to church, but my parents would usually get mad and leave. The only real consistency I had in church was at Boys Ranch because everyone there had to go. At my young age, my parents believed they could not control me, and admittedly, I was the typical hard-to-control boy. So at 9 years of age, I went to Cal Farley's. I stayed there for 3.5 years, and then my parents got me out and made me go to the St. Lawrence Catholic Parochial School, where I participated and gained just enough knowledge of the Catholic religion to know what a Hail Mary was and to serve as an altar boy. My folks moved to Dodge City, Kansas, and there I actually had horses, and I started to cowboy a little bit for a couple of years. And this is what I really wanted to do. But we moved to Tucson, Arizona, and within 4 months of that move, we moved again to the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation near Globe, Arizona. I spent my sophomore year in high school, and the only spiritual upbringing there was I was in the minority culture. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed teenager riding on a school bus 20 miles one way with a busload of White Mountain Apache Indian kids. Needless to say, it was a real education, and I was the one who would never give in very easily. I moved back to Tucson, and finally, to get away from the confusion, the anger, mismanagement, and mishandling in my own household, I joined the Army prior to my senior year. Thankfully, I've always had enough motivation to be somewhat self-educated, and I would challenge the GED while at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and passed. It wasn't until I met my wife, Beverly, that I got serious about becoming a Christian. Of course, my own stubbornness and pride was an obstacle in the beginning. Simply put, I had become a toxic person to everyone around me. And I really didn't want to be that person anymore. Deep down, I knew if I didn't change, I would lose everything I had worked for. The path I was on was dark, mostly based upon past experiences. But in the end, I met with Pastor Starnes, a gentle man full of wisdom, and he helped turn me to the one thing that I knew deep in my heart that was true and right. I repented and surrendered my heart to Jesus and became a committed follower. It challenged me with purpose and peace. Now, I say that because peace is one of those concepts I'm still unaccustomed to, but I'm getting better at it. I know I need to continually trust in the Lord and try my best not to lean on my own understanding. The door I went through was the beginning of my faith journey. I was fortunate at the time to find prevenient grace, even though I had no idea of it at the time. I never realized that or understood that until I went on the walk to Emmaus. Now, through all these years, I have learned something very valuable, and that is how fortunate I am to have a good wife. Proverbs 18:22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Tom Hardy stated that at your very best, you won't be good enough for the wrong person, but at your absolute worst, you will be worth it to the right person. After 31 years, I thank God for the gift of the relationship with my wife, and she is my heart of gold. Now, there are some doors that have a driving force that is unavoidable. It's no one's fault, but you will go through it no matter what. For me and my family, that door was slung wide open on the evening of May 5th, 2019. I had since moved on from our Pentecostal church, but my wife had stayed, and I was at another church. My daughter, Taylor, and her friend and I were at the house waiting for Beverly to get home from the evening church service to watch a movie that we had all had planned to see. While waiting for my wife to get home, I received a call from the girlfriend of our son, Tristan. That call opened up a door that our family was forced to go through, and we never expected it. And we as a family can never go back. She called to inform me that Tristan had had a fatal motorcycle accident. I can never forget that call. Of course, she was crying and hard to understand, but it was like taking a sledgehammer of surreal reality to me. After a moment, my training was able to kick in, and I was able to put my brain in gear and act due to my own experience with death calls. I gathered up my daughter and her friend, and we went to pick up my wife. And to be honest, that was the longest drive of my life from Northeast 24th to Northeast 24th and Echo Street. When we arrived, I could hear her in the bathroom wailing as a mother who has only lost her son can. This broke my heart. But I did the only thing that I knew to do, and that was just to be there for her. There's one thing I've learned since going through that doorway, and that is you never move on. You never move on from the death of a loved one, but you can move forward. And the grief will always be with you, but to go forward honors their memory. Genesis 32, 22 through 32 has the story of Jacob. And we know how Jacob was somewhat mischievous and somewhat of a deceiver. Like me and many of us, he was a man who wanted things his own way. But one night he wrestled with an angel of God, and he was changed. Jacob dreamed he saw a doorway with a staircase or a ladder which ascended into the heavens. Jacob refused to let the angel go unless he was blessed. Now, this is a type of aggression that many may not understand, but we need to understand this. Too many times we wrestle with God in our hearts and in our minds, and more times than not, we only want to survive the outcome instead of asking God for his blessing. Jacob was persistent and blessed beyond his wildest dreams, and his name was forever changed to Israel, and he built a nation through it. Then there is that one doorway that we all have the tendency to slam shut. I know this doorway all too well. It's because of our own selfishness and our own stubbornness where we become the driving force. It is where we become the aggressor, knowing that Jesus continually beckons to us. Revelations 3:20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Remember, it's not a fight until you meet resistance. And as men, our mistakes are of a sacred nature. Men, we are prone to hide and not admit our mistakes, no matter how small or insignificant. Ask yourself, are you the resistance? Are you the one fighting Jesus? Is your heart or your mind telling yourself to resist when Jesus is knocking? We resist because our ego has become an idol. Our egos allow us to idolize ourselves, and we refuse to listen and block out the word of truth because of what we stand for. And it's our own ideas that have become an agenda in which we try to prove and justify. In the process, it's us who have become a false god. This is when we isolate ourselves and we become susceptible to the evils of this world. Exodus 4:16 says, so do not corrupt yourselves by making an idol in any form, and that includes ourselves. Now, I have several application points. Number one, simply to learn from your doorways that you have been through, whether they have been good and led to prosperity, but especially if they have brought a negative experience. We need to realize God still has this, and he's the one in control, that everything is happening the right way. We just don't interpret it that way, and this can cause us to complain. So don't waste your time by looking back, but move forward. Pastor Curtis often reminds us that you are part of a team, starting with your own family, but also this church and the men beside you. We are all part of a community of believers who love God. We need more than ever to listen to one another and to hold one another accountable. We are stronger when we lean into those who have been there and done that. When we do, we allow that doorway to breathe, and we are able to pie that room and avoid or attack the threats that lie within. We must stand together. We have the power and strength because we are a community grounded in the gospel. And we heard this verse several times this past weekend, Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. Be a friend, and be the type of friend in Mark 2:3-8, who is willing to go against the crowd and tear through the roof if necessary to get to Jesus. Aristotle stated, in poverty and other misfortunes in life, true friends are a sure refuge. Whatever you do, surrender the outcome. Don't become a victim of something you can't change or control. Now, you can control your attitude and you can control your work ethic. In the end, that will define who you really are. Don't be afraid to do the uncomfortable work. Take a risk and have faith. There is no guarantee in life. The only guarantee is what you do in life. And when you're wrestling with God's angel or trying to make that decision that God has placed in your heart or a trial you might be in, don't forget to ask God for his blessing. 1 Chronicles 4:10, Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, and that your hand would be with me." Keeping in mind the most important blessing as a man to keep is our honor, our integrity, and our faith intact. Lastly, be careful not to think more of yourself than you should. I am not always right, and I know when I tend to think I am right, I'm usually wrong, and my wife will not hesitate to remind me of it. Romans 12:3 says, "For I say through the grace given to me to everyone who is among you, not to think more highly than themselves, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith." I am grateful for his confidence in my faith. Then, when it is time to just be there, then just be there and be a good listener. It allows those spiritual doorways to just breathe. Pastor Curtis tells us often, whatever gets your attention sets your direction, which will ultimately get you to your destination. Our destination is not here, but it is on the other side of our heart. One final thought before I close. There might be some who, after hearing this testimony, will think, well, I was abandoned. And I have to admit, there are times in my life I've had to struggle with that very issue. However, I can honestly say I keep coming to this one conclusion, and that is I know that I am a child of the King, the one who can never lie or forsake. And because of that, I have been and I am blessed beyond measure, and my territory has been enlarged. As we go through the hallway of life, we can all be surprised and ambushed by the open doors and the doorways of uncertainty. And many doors will have a driving force where you will need to either avoid or be aggressive and solve the problem. However, as long as we are seeking Jesus upward, inward, and then outward, we may have regrets, but not the guilt, because instead of falling backward, we are able to fall forward. And there will be times where we wish we had done things differently, but know that we live in an imperfect world of imperfect people who make imperfect decisions. Thank you, gentlemen. There's questions on your tables, and I hope you have a blessed day.